Yeah, this is a complex environment, if you allow me to summarize it as such. What it means is that several communities across the country are security challenged. It means INEC, which is over 176,000 polling units, will be forced to deploy and conduct elections in this security challenged environment. In a circumstance where it does not own a single security operative, it's having to rely on, if you allow me to say, third parties. In this context, I mean public security departments, about 29 of them, to support the provision of an safe, secure, and conducive environment for it to conduct that elections. Now, what INEC did is to put together an ad hoc committee of this, about 20 plus members of the public security department. It calls that committee the Interagency Consultative Committee on Election Security. And the idea is to facilitate some handshaking interaction between INEC and the public security department so that they are aligned in terms of what INEC's expectations are and then what these security agencies need to do. Consistently, this committee, I'll be calling it ICES, that's the acronym for it. This committee meets regularly at the federal level, and ideally it's meant to also meet at the state level and then at the local government level, so that this security challenged environment is not only identified, but it is also managed to ensure that INEC is able to do its job. Now, the second component is what INEC has in-house. INEC has a tool it calls FMAT, which is the Election Violence Monitoring and Advocacy Tool. It's a very innovative tool that INEC has kind of evolved over the years, and I think it started as far back as 2012. And currently, it's deployed using modern technology. There's an app on the phone. It goes out to survey security environment. It collates the results of that survey, conduct what in security parlance we call a security risk assessment, and then makes that risk assessment available to members of this ICES. And then the result is that the two sides are aligned on where the security challenges are. And then, of course, the expectation, and I use this word consciously, the expectation is that the security departments will now manage the environment. So what is the reality at the moment? Just like you've pointed and shown it, and the reality is that across the 6 geopolitical zones, there are several communities that unfortunately are security challenged. So INEC is going to conduct the elections in that circumstance. And let me use the Northwest, which I'm sure Kaderia is very familiar with, to explain all that I've said over the last 3-4 minutes. If we pick Katsina and Zamfara State, that have several security challenge communities, what the result of this interaction between INEC and ICES has done is to identify the most violent security exposed communities. And the result is that INEC is attempting to do 2 things. In some areas, it's moving the voters and the polling unit from there to less security-prone environment. And we've been informed that it would move the residents of those communities, that's the ones that are still remaining. Of course, a lot of them have been displaced, but the ones that are remaining, INEC will provide transportation for them, bring them to the less security-challenged areas where they will vote, and then, of course, return them after. The report that you anchored this segment of the show with by your correspondent referred to a statement by Professor Zuru, who is the chairman of the Electoral Institute. And in my honest opinion, I requested for that speech, and I think he was misinterpreted by a significant segment of the media. What the occasion where he made that statement was meant to validate about 4 documents, including a security handbook for all security operatives that will be deployed during the elections. So I'm responding to a question by telling you that INEC on its own, as well as several civil society organizations, have attempted to approach election security management from a very structural and systematic manner. They've produced 4 documents, including a handbook. They've also engaged with the management of this security department. Remember, I said there are about 27 or 29 of them. And what they've done is during that engagement, they've attempted to introduce election security management training at the level of both recruitment as well as the training of security operatives. So now if you go to some schools owned by some of the security organizations, you find out that there is a module in their training component on election security management. So it's not just a week, 2 weeks, 1 month, 6 months before an election that security operatives are trained. They are actually trained, during their normal training procedures. And then ahead of the elections itself, several training components are organized. Just yesterday, the Inspector General of Police graduated a significant portion of our mobile police. I'm a little bit surprised it wasn't significantly covered by the media, but there was a circular released by the Inspector General of Police to that effect. And that's just one of the several other 27 or 29 security departments. So a lot is being done in that regard to train our security operators on election security management. But that is just one component. If time would allow us, there are, to my knowledge, so 2 components of this risk assessment that ends up in the production of an election security plan, as it were. There is a general component which looks at internal and external threats to the election. And then there is an expert component where persons who are experts in election security management also produce their input. And then these 2 are matched together. And it is the result that ends up being what the product that INEC and then ISS uses for election security management. But suffice to say that a lot of work is being done on the ground that unfortunately, for some reasons, is not in the public space.
Dr. Kabiru, now, just to follow up on even what Kadira said, now the Nigerian Elections Violence Tracker documented 130 violent and at least 200 fatalities linked to politics. Now, just like you said, Kadira, now political violence has increased in the run-up to the elections. Moreover, with Nigeria's 3 major ethnic groups all represented by frontline presidential candidates, they are most likely to be ethnic divisions exploited by die-hard political supporters using disinformation to further ignite tensions. Now, should there also be a focus on cyber security, how people are going to use, social media to incite violence and to even push further their agenda, voter suppression? Should there be a focus on that as well?
Definitely, and in fact, if I'm going to categorize the risks, to the 2023 elections, cyber threat would probably come, if not number 1, number 2. The good thing is at the level of INEC is doing a lot. Just like you've mentioned, INEC has adopted technology, and a lot of that technology, the superstructure upon which that technology lies, is in the cyberspace. And so anyone, for instance, who wants to disrupt a component or even the elections itself would engage, in some form of cyber warfare or attack. And we know, looking back at the 2019 elections, that was done. Even though the results of that, or the benefit that they got, was to influence the outcome of the elections, which is a totally different thing from disrupting the elections, as it were. And we also know, if you allow me out a little bit circumspect here, we also know the countries that were involved. We also have an idea of the organizations that were involved. And that was 2019. A lot has happened in terms of development, in terms of new tools for influencing the outcome of elections between 2019 and 2023. So it is a major challenge. But the good news is this: like I mentioned, INEC is aware. INEC has invested massively in strengthening it's the firewalls and other protection measures it has within the cyber and other IT components that it is using for the elections. Unfortunately, it's not my field, so I can't confidently say that what INEC has done is enough. The other positive development is that because Nigeria is a part of the global community, and if I use the police as an example, the Nigerian police is actively aligned with Interpol. And I know that we've been receiving a lot of information with regards to threats that I imagine, some of them, of course, within the cyberspace. We've also been receiving a lot of training. So I know, and again, I'll be circumspect here, I know that several of our security departments have received training, have received resources to enhance their capacity for managing some components of the cyber threat that could affect the 2023 elections. My conclusion would be we need more effort in this regard. And the role of the fourth estate, cannot be overemphasized. I must commend you for providing this platform. And I think others too, especially including the civil society organizations, need to speak a little bit more around this area so that we enhance awareness. And of course, with the awareness, the expectations is that the mitigation measures would also increase.